All right, so today I'm going to be painting some zombies. They are zombies from North Star Miniatures, I believe. They are for sale at Galactic, or if we don't have them in stock, we can order them. They're specifically, North Star Games specifically makes figures for Frostgrave. But, you know, they're just generic zombies. You can use them for whatever. So today I'm going to be painting 3 different zombies. So 3 different ways to paint a zombie. Painting one that's sort of like fantastical, sort of typical green decaying zombie. Then another one that has very pale skin. And then another one that I imagine is like a follower of a vampire or something. So sort of a zombie that can think almost a little bit and is a follower of a vampire lord or something like that. I'll just do the 3 different styles just so you can, if you want to paint some zombies for whatever you need them for, you have some different options. So I'm going to be using contrast paint for most of this. And contrast paint is, as far as I know, I have not used contrast paint on these beginner streams yet. And I was a little wary to use them because they are different. But I think they're a really good tool for beginners. They look like this. So this is the normal paint I use. It's that big. So as you can see, the contrast pots are a little bit bigger. They say contrast right here on them. They are all for sale at Galactic. The difference is that, so at Galactic we have basically 2 types of paint. And at your local game store, if you're not local, you have 2 sizes of paint. Basically, you have Citadel pots like this, and you have bottles of various companies like this. These are anywhere from $2 to $4. These are $4. The only downside to contrast paint is this size. They are $7.80 a piece, which is, just on the face of it, quite expensive. I will say that a contrast paint will last you a long time. You can paint many miniatures with a single bottle of contrast paint. So, bigger investment up front, but will last you a long time. And as a beginner, I think they can net you results that are easily 2 or 3 times as good as you can get just starting out with normal layer paint. Obviously, some people will do better with layer paint. Some people will do better with contrast. But if you're just starting out to painting, brand new, or just got into it, at least consider trying some contrast paint. I think it's great. I use it on almost every miniature I paint almost these days. So yeah. So with that all said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this zombie on the left here. And this is going to be the zombie that we do in a sort of stereotypical fantasy war game style. So we're going to start with a contrast paint called Plaguebearer Flesh. And this is just sort of a puke green color, I guess you'd say. And so, as you can see, unlike normal paint, it is quite watery. It is very watery, as opposed to, just to refresh your memory, normal paint, not watery, quite thick. So, what we're going to do is going to take this contrast paint, and you can load it all over your brush. You can get your brush completely soaked in it, and it will not matter. If you tried to do this with normal paint, you'd cover detail, and it would be terrible. So then we're just going to put this all over his skin. And as you can see, the contrast paint flows into all the little recesses and flows off of the higher parts, and basically just tints all the parts of your miniature in the color that it is. I should say that, so these contrast paints are from Citadel, which is the paint brand of Games Workshop. They sell a specific can of spray paint in 2 colors for this. They're incredibly expensive, though, so I would not recommend them if you are not going to be painting like armies with this stuff. The spray paint that's on here is Rust-Oleum Camo Shade, I think tan or sand, and that's available at Walmart. It's like $3.50 for a can, and it works just fine. The only thing you want to do if you are going to use contrast paint is you want to make sure that your undercoat is a light color. If it is a dark color, the contrast paint will not show up. You can imagine, like, if you, I'm sure when you were a kid, you did the thing in school where you took a flashlight and put a piece of tissue paper over it that was a color, and the light changed color. Well, that's essentially what you're doing with the contrast paint. You're tinting the miniature, and so if you, for instance, take a black wall and hold that colored flashlight up to the black wall, you're not going to be able to see very much color. But if you take that flashlight and shine it up against a white wall, you'll be able to see the color much better. Same thing on this. It's much easier to tint light colors than it is to tint dark colors. So that's really the only requirement, as it were, for contrast paint, is a light colored primer. So I think I got all his skin. This guy, some of these miniatures are a little confusing because the skin and the cloth kind of blend together. Thankfully he's a zombie and he's like, you know, he's going to be all dirty and disgusting and whatever. So it's not a huge deal. If he has some pus on his pants, you know, I don't think he's going to lose much sleep. Or I guess he's going to lose all his sleep because he's a zombie. But, you know, you get the idea. So there's the first layer of contrast paint. We're going to let this dry. If you are going to layer contrast paints on top of each other, like I'm going to do today, the first color needs to be, depending on what you're trying to do, the first color needs to be 100% dry before you layer on top of it. Depending on what we're doing, so on my third layer of contrast paint, I won't be so much caring about blending, and so I won't have to wait for that to dry. But in this case, I want this skin tone completely dried, and then we will move on to the next one. So I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to move on to my second zombie. And this zombie is going to be sort of a... He's got skin underneath, you can clearly tell, but he's going to be pale. He's going to have pale skin. So we're going to start with a pretty dark color, and this is called Fyreslayer Flesh. Again, a contrast color. So I'm just going to put it on the exact same way, but this time this is a much darker color, but applied in the same manner. Just making sure to go all over his skin. And another thing you want to keep in mind if you decide to try out contrast paint is normally if you remember, if you've seen any of the other streams, like when we did the Blue Wizard, for instance, we started with a dark blue, then we layered up to a medium blue, and then we layered a light blue. Well, if you do that, so say we take a dark contrast color, a medium contrast color, and a light contrast color, and you do the exact same thing. You put your dark color down first, then you go in with your medium color. Your medium color is not going to show up because your miniature is already super dark. So you have to go in reverse if you're going to use contrast paint, which means you have to put your light colors down first, then add your medium colors, then add your dark colors, which can be counterintuitive. But, you know, once you get the hang of it, not a big deal. Are these zombies from D&D or are they actually Warhammer? They are not Warhammer. They are from a company called North Star Miniatures, which makes miniatures not specifically for Frostgrave, but with the Frostgrave license. They're not, I should say, they are made specifically for Frostgrave. They're not made by the company that makes Frostgrave. The company that makes Frostgrave, I don't actually know the name of, but they contract with a miniatures company who makes the miniatures. So while they are meant for Frostgrave, you could literally use them as anything. They're just generic zombies. So you could use them in Warhammer as poxwalkers or plague bearers. You could use them in D&D as some trash mobs. You could use them in The Walking Dead. You could use them in all sorts of stuff. Generic zombie is pretty much can fit in anywhere. So I'm just getting his skin, making sure his skin is completely covered with this dark color. And then while this dries, we're going to move on to our third zombie. So this is the like pale skinned zombie that you might see. In my head is the I Am Legend zombies. If you remember what those look like, or they look Like they're pretty intact. This is as far as I can remember. I haven't seen I Am Legend in a while, but as far as I remember, they're pretty intact. But they're very skinny, very pale. But they're not rotting. You can't see their bones and stuff. Again, I could be wrong, but in my head, I have a mental picture of a light-skinned zombie, not falling apart, who can still run, who has muscle density, all that kind of stuff. So that's what this is going to be. So we're going to go on to our third type of zombie now. And this is the type of zombie in my head again. I'm sort of thinking like follower of a vampire lord sort of thing. So maybe from Skyrim. I think there's a quest line where you can become a vampire or join a vampire lord who lives on an island or something. Again, I haven't played that in a while, but that kind of idea. So this would be more of a zombie that is in an army, who can think a little bit more, like to march and to move to a battlefield and stuff, that kind of thing. So that's what this third zombie is going to be. So he's going to be darker skinned, but so sort of in the fantasy realm, I guess. So you don't, not necessarily human zombie. Perhaps like he might have been created. He could be a construct of the vampire lord as opposed to actually be a human body. And really just because you can paint a zombie almost any way you want. I just needed a third one. So in my head, this guy's following a vampire lord to battle. And so he's kind of gonna have a vampire-like feel to him. At least hopefully. There's a series, can't remember what it's called now. There's a series where, maybe not a series, maybe it's just a movie. It's probably a book first, and I've just outraged all the people who've read it. But where I think they're in London, and vampires sort of rule the world, essentially. And they have, like, blood banks of humans and stuff like that they go and buy from, like you'd buy from a grocery store. Things like that. And I remember the vampires sort of having this, like, pale but dark sort of complexion. Pale but dark. It doesn't make sense at all. Sort of like a dingy sort of look to them. That's what I'm going for with this one. Alright, so then... Oh, sorry, I didn't say the color I used. I used Basilicum Gray for that. My stat guy is probably screaming at me. You didn't say that color! So there's that. Again, just all over the skin. So I'm going to put him back. And then our first zombie is pretty much all dry with that first coat. So we're going to now do our second coat. And for this, so let me just catch up on chat real quick. Definitely has an I Am Legend vibe. Excellent. Sounds like the Romero zombie. Okay. Romero zombie in my head rings a bell, but I couldn't talk intelligently about what it is. But I feel like I've heard that before. I'll take your word for it. My zombie lore is non-existent. And there it is. Statman yelling at me. Hey, Greg, what color is that one? Whatever. All right, so next color I'm going to use is Iyanden Yellow, a contrast color again. And so now we want this zombie. He's rotting. He's got his, if you look real close, he's got his entrails hanging out here. You know, stuff's going wrong with this zombie. So his skin is going to be discolored. There's going to be bruising. There's going to be blood. Capillaries have broken. All this stuff. I think that movie is Daylight, maybe, with William Dafoe. Possibly. I'm going to have to look it up after the stream. I feel like in the trailer, it's raining, and there's like a zombie crawling on the ceiling or something, or down a skyscraper. I don't know. I've got this mental image, and who knows where it came from. So I'm going to take this Iyanden Yellow, and I'm just kind of going to touch it. So where he's got these little open wounds here, I'm going to touch this just around there, around his guts some. Not being careful with this, just sort of haphazardly around his body, some on his face. And this is just if you've ever gotten a bruise. Which if you've never gotten a bruise, then maybe you're a zombie or a vampire. When you get a bruise and it starts to heal, sort of turns a pale yellow sort of color. So, not that the zombie would necessarily be healing, but, you know, yellow's a good discoloration color for green, so we're going to use it. So I'm just going to sort of tap it around a couple places. That'll be good. And we'll tap it on this guy's head also. Looks like he has a zombie head in his hand, so I don't know what's going on there, but that'll make for some fun blood effect later. So that's the done. And then, like I said before, normally you want contrast paint to completely dry. We're not going to in this case, though, because we're going to use some Magos Purple. Again, still a contrast paint. Just going to shake it up, and then we're going to put this sort of in and around where we put the yellow, rather. So this is a very pale purple. It does not cover very well at all. It does not make things super purple, but it just will make this look, just have a little more contrast, basically, since purple is beginning to get towards the red on the color wheel. And red and green are contrast colors. Just tapping this around in a couple places will give us some nice contrast and make the skin look discolored. And, you know, a bruise can be purple, blue, orange, yellow, all sorts of colors. So just going to tap this around in a couple places. And there you can see now his skin is properly disheveled. So I'm going to leave that to dry now. And I'm going to move on, or go back to our second zombie. This is our I Am Legend zombie. So we want his skin to be quite pale, as I talked about, and I think people would agree this is anything but pale currently. So we're going to take some Apothecary White contrast paint, and we're just going to completely cover over the initial contrast paint that we did. This will still give us a skin tone underneath it, but it will be very obviously quite pale because they'll be white or a light gray sort of everywhere. This contrast paint is called Apothecary White, but really it's gray. And this actually works better because skin tone, a pale skin tone would never be pure white. There'd always be some yellowing or some sort of imperfection in it. So the fact that this is slightly gray works out for us. So we're just going to cover all the skin we did before. And then we will move on to our third zombie, who is I'm just going to call him the Skyrim zombie, or the vampire zombie, I guess. I'll call him the vampire zombie. I don't remember if there are actually zombies that follow that vampire in Skyrim. But so there we go. So now we still, as you can see, still have the skin tone coming through in a lot of places, but he's also very clearly quite pale. And like if you saw a human walking down the street with that kind of skin, you'd be like, whoa, something's going on there. So I'm going to put him back, and we're going to let that dry. The Romero zombies are the ones from Night of the Living Dead. No decay, just risen people. Gotcha. Yep. Gotcha. All right. So we're going to move on to our vampire zombie. And I'm going to take my first non-contrast color, Gorthor Brown in this case. Just a nice medium brown. It's my favorite brown that Citadel makes. Citadel's my favorite paint brand, so I like to use this color. So then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to highlight the skin with this. So just on the fingers, not going all the way between the fingers, just the raised parts here. And he's a zombie. You can be messy. It's not a big deal. So then I'm just going to highlight the major muscles and stuff here. Like that. And down here. Basically, you just want to leave that darker brown or darker gray that we put on earlier. You want to leave that in between the muscles. But all the major skin bits here you want to paint in this brown color. So just make sure to get all the high points, his nose and down here. Just do the bottom of his hands just a little bit. And then figure out if he's wearing pants or if that's his leg. I think it's pants. This is leg in here. It's so hard to tell. I think this is all a leg. But, you know, doesn't really matter. Zombies will be crawling all over the table, and no one will mind in your war game or your RPG if you paint a zombie's skin as cloth or cloth as skin. Alright, so there's that. So that's most of the gray covered up. So now he's brown, but he's got this dark gray in the cracks of his skin and just looks a little unnatural. So then we're going to go and we're going to do all the teeth of these three zombies together. That's something they will share. So I'm going to use for that from Reaper, Vampiric Highlight. It's my go-to white as of late, and whenever I use it, my stat man, who writes down all the colors I use for me so I can add them to the videos later, makes a Twilight joke, and so I always try to use this color just so I can get at least one Twilight joke a day. Because I do enjoy the Twilight joke. So I'm just going to pull them all out here. We're going to do all the teeth at the same time. And normally, you might be saying, but Greg, he's a zombie. Why are his teeth so bright white? Well, we're going to be adding some more things to this zombie. And so we want the teeth to stick out behind all the other stuff we're going to add. So we're going to do a very, very bright white that doesn't really make sense because his teeth should be decayed like the rest of him. But that will look good when we add all the other accoutrements to him. So I'm just going to paint in some teeth here. Doesn't have to be super accurate. I should get it on camera though, huh? Just make sure there's some white on his face and his mouth, basically. Oh, this guy doesn't have teeth. Oh, look at that. He's got these little tiny corners of his mouth exposed. So we're going to try to put a white dot in there, because there probably are teeth in there. And because it's so bright, it will still show up, hopefully, when we go back in. So we'll just do that. So it's like he's got mini fangs, which, you know, if he's following a vampire, he'd have fangs. Alright, so that's that color done. We're then going to go in, and we're going to do all the eyeballs at once also. And we're going to use some, not Vampiric White, Black Templar for this. This is just the black contrast paint. You could absolutely do with this with just a normal black, just a layer paint black. I prefer to do it with the contrast, though, because it flows much better, and there's a greater, or rather, there's less of a risk that it flows out and gets on things that I don't want it on. So I'm just going to paint his eyes like that, and then I'm going to go back in with the wet brush and pull some of it out. So I don't need that much darkness on his eyeballs. That'll work. And do the same thing with the next guy. Just cover the eyeball like that. And like this. Probably should be, you know, I'm probably painting over the eyelids and stuff on these guys, but bigger, abnormally large eyes painted all black like this on a zombie or on any creature that's already sort of scary will just help the unnatural feeling and stuff like that. Alright, so there's all their eyes done. So then, I'm going to move on and do their clothes really quick. So for this, let's see, I'm going to start with this zombie who's the vampire follower. I'm going to go with some normal layer paint. I'm just going to use Rakarth Flesh. It's like a very pale brown moving towards white, or off-white anyway. And I'm just going to paint his clothes in this color. I'm specifically painting these clothes in this color because I'm going to be adding some blood to this zombie. And blood splatter all over a white or very close to white tunic looks really good. So, just gonna paint all these rags in this color. Then we'll come back and give it a little bit of a highlight. Maybe a shade, we'll see. And then we'll go on to the effects, which will be the blood. So just grabbing all the little folds of his clothes here. Don't want to get this on the skin, but also you don't want to leave any part of the cloth not this color, because it will look strange if a random bit of cloth that you can very clearly see is cloth is the same color as his skin. That would be strange. And normally, if you were super concerned about realisticness, you wouldn't paint all his clothes the same color, because, you know, zombies are probably wearing the clothes that they were wearing when they died as humans. And so I would imagine for most people it's rare that they go out of the house wearing pants and a shirt, or a skirt and a shirt, or whatever, that are the exact same color. But for this guy, just to get him done, he was very matching today, on the day he died. Just gonna do this, and there's a little bit of a ring of some of his boot maybe, or pants, who knows. Alright, so there's those robes done. I'm going to give it a very, very light wash of a contrast called Agorist Dunes. So it's already pretty light, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my brush in the water, not get all the water off, then dip my brush in the contrast paint, then dip my brush in the water again, and this will give me a very, very light wash that I can just put onto the cloth here, just to give it a little bit of shade, but not to completely overpower the main color. So I'm going to do the same thing again, rinse my brush, put it in the contrast paint, dip it in the water, and then just tap it in here. Just like that. That looks good. Alright, so then we'll let him dry. A little too much brown in the front here. Just pull some of it back off. There we go. Gonna let him dry. And I think we'll go back to the decaying zombie here. And I think I'm gonna do his tunic, robe, whatever you want to call it, thing in a blue color. So I'm gonna use what is widely considered to be the worst contrast paint, and I tend to agree. It's called Ultramarine Blue. I think it's a terrible color, but I think it will work in this particular instance on these clothes. It doesn't cover very well, and the difference between the shade and the highlight that it leaves is almost non-existent. So I'm not a super big fan of it, but in some instances it can work. So I'm just gonna put it on these. It's like scrap of clothes he's wearing here. And since this is this zombie is more of the fantasy, like wargaming style of zombie, this cloth would be where you'd be having your army colors or whatever. So he matched the rest of your army, and so just a vibrant color. Typically, army colors are vibrant, so I use the blue here just because it is pretty vibrant. Then he's got a little piece of cloth or something on he's on both wrists, or both ankles actually, so I'm just going to go back to the Basilicum Gray that we used on the other zombie. And just basically any other detail that's on him that I haven't painted yet, I'll paint this. So just these down here, just so it has a different color on it, more than anything. There we go. Just get in there. There we go. All right. Oh, and then I'll put some color in the mouth and the eyeballs of this head in his hand there. So, yep. All right. So he's basically done. We just have to add the effects. So I think he's dry enough. I'll do that now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this paint, which is called Blood for the Blood God. It is from Citadel, and it is a technical paint. And the idea is that you paint this on, and when it dries, it looks like freshly dripping paint. Freshly dripping blood. So if you're going for like a scabbed blood look, this is not what you want. This is looking like fresh blood that is actively bleeding. So I'm just going to put it into some of the holes here on him, and then do a little drip down like these wounds are oozing. Some in here, and then have it dripping down. Then I'll put some in and around his intestines here. Just like that, not covering it completely, just adding some blood. He's got a little tear up here in his bicep. I'll put some there. Let's see, he's got a sore or muscle exposed down here, so I'll put some in there. And on his knee here. And then he's got these like ribs and bones and stuff exposed, so I'll do those. Do that pretty heavy. And just have it dripping down. And let's see, he's got this wound on the back of his head. I'll do that, and then maybe have it dripping onto his back there. Okay, that looks like about it in terms of holes in him. So then, I'm just going to take a whole bunch and put it on this guy's head here, like it's freshly been lopped off or something. Just going to put it in a pretty big pool there. And then maybe something like that. Coming out of his mouth, his nose, that sort of thing. Maybe a little bit over here. There we go. That should work. So then, we're going to take our next technical paint, which is called Nurgle's Rot, also from Citadel. That one zombie looks similar to Iron Maiden's mascot, Eddie. I'll take your word for it. So we're going to take this Nurgle's Rot stuff, which is meant to look like pus, basically. And I'm just going to put a little bit of it in and around these wounds. Don't want to overpower the blood, but just want to mix it in with the blood, make it look a little disgusting. So, he's not just bleeding, he's rotting and bleeding. So just going to put a little bit of this around the guts there. I'll put some up by this guy's eyes, maybe. His knee here, on this wound up there. Put some on his face. And this is where I'm going to put it over his teeth here. Like he's, maybe pus is coming out of his mouth or something. I'm going to put some up here on his head wound, like it's trying to heal, but not very effectively. And just put some in the wound back here. And maybe some on his arms here. And then he's got a boil or something right there. We're just going to make it into a pus nodule or whatever. Just for extra disgusting. Alright, and there you go. That is that zombie done. He's got some discolored skin. He's got some blood. He's got some pus. He's all ready to go. So then we're going to move on to the vampire, back to the vampire zombie now. And we're just going to use, get a hair that stuck to him off. Just going to use this Blood for the Blood God again. And if he's a vampire, then he's probably trying to bite people. So I'm going to put some blood on his mouth here. Like he is freshly fed. And then I'm going to put some on the ends of his fingers also. Just sort of tap it around. Doesn't have to be even on every finger. Just so that it's... There's blood on them. Do the same thing on the other one. You don't want to go crazy with this, because you don't want to just lose all the color that you have on the miniature. But you want to go crazy enough that it's clearly obvious what it's supposed to be. Just going to bring some of that up. Just going to wipe some of it away, just so the brightness of the teeth shine through a little bit. And then we're just going to basically put some splatters on his robes wherever we want. Just sort of like this. Just like he's been getting mixed up in all sorts of bloody activities. So he's all sorts of messy. Put some on his back too, why not? Who knows? Maybe he rolled around in the blood after he claimed his last victim and he's just like super excited that he killed his first human. And he just rolled around in their blood. So there's your vampiric bloody zombie all done. So then our last zombie, and of course you can go many steps farther with this guy, but that's your basic. If you're painting zombies, you're probably painting a lot of zombies because one zombie's not scary. You need like a horde of them. So you just want to get them done. That's a good way to get them done. Or the rotting zombie. So then we have this guy left. And I'm going to go back to the Black Templar contrast paint. And I'm going to paint his cloth or clothes in this so that we get a heavy contrast against his skin, since his skin is going to be so pale. So I'm going to do this in black. And then we're going to take this zombie and do something interesting with it. I don't know if it's going to work. But I believe it is maybe Call of Duty World at War. I remember playing that with, back in the day with when I worked at a summer camp. Sometimes we would have video game time and the kids would enjoy playing, high school students would enjoy playing that. And if I remember correctly, the zombie's eyes glowed like they were filled with energy or something that was propelling the zombies forward. So I'm going to do the same thing with this guy. I'm going to paint his eyeballs and any holes in his skin, so his nose, his mouth, sores, whatever, in a very bright color. In this case, I'll go straight into this. I'm going to use Tesseract Glow. It's not technically a contrast paint. As you can see, it does not say contrast. It says technical. I don't care what GW, Games Workshop, wants to tell me. It's a contrast paint. They can name it whatever they like. It's a contrast paint. So I'm going to paint this in on his mouth, first of all. Like that. Paint it in on his eyeballs. Yes. I don't know what you're referring to with just yes, but agreeing with me, I'll take it. Alright. Does he have any other sores anywhere on his body? He may not. Oh, maybe right here. Little puncture wound. So we'll just put some green in there. And then since he doesn't have a lot of sores, I'm just going to cheat it a little bit. I'm just going to put it in the gaps of his skin here. Like the gaps between his muscles. Just like this. fingers. All right, so there's our... Maybe he's... Oh, I gotta do his hair. Let me do his hair real quick. Snakebite leather. It's a great color. Contrast color. I'll do that for his hair. So maybe this is our Call of Duty zombie. Or I Am Legend the sequel zombie where they all became radioactive. Who knows? Just to be different. He's got some glowing energy inside of him. Oh, the eyes, yeah. Excellent. I'm not crazy. I do remember some things. All right, there we go. His hair's done. And there's our glowing I Am Legend sequel that never happened. Nazi zombie, Call of Duty something zombie. So then I'll just get all three here. And there you go. So there's 3 ways of painting zombies. We got rotten, decaying, bleeding, pussing all over the place zombie. We've got vampire lord follower, hair stuck to my arm. There we go. Vampire lord follower, bloodthirsty zombie. And then we've got glowing ghoul, Nazi zombie, space Hulk, I don't know what zombie. 3 ways of painting zombies. There are many others. These are just the 3 I chose to do today that I knew I could execute reasonably well. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll be back on this channel again next Wednesday, painting something. Who knows what? Maybe a dragon. I say maybe a dragon every week, and I never have a dragon. One day I'll have a dragon. Otherwise, I'll be streaming in the Warhammer group on Friday, the first Friday of my long-form project, which is going to be painting my own fat mat to play Warhammer on. So that should be exciting. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.